So I'm very happy to be here with the co-writer and producer of some of the coolest spectacle that's been on screen in the last 30 years. His new show, The Ark, is on SyFy right now. Dean Devlin, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Great. So we're going to talk about Stargate, specifically the sequence where they go through the Stargate for the very first time. Just as a moment in your filmography, like what is it that you can look back on? What's memorable about that particular scene, that moment for you?
It's so interesting that that's the moment you've picked, because I speak a lot about that moment.
It's a good moment.
When I'm talking about screenwriting and filmmaking. There's an old saying about bad writing where a writer will write, "The army marches over the hill." And of course that means 5 days of shooting and 1,000 shots, and it's so much more complicated. Well, this is the mistake I had made in the script for that scene, because all I wrote was, they walk through the Stargate. That's literally all it said in the script. But as they started to do it, it became evident that all of them were bringing the uniqueness of their character to how they were reacting to the Stargate. And Kurt Russell comes in, he's very tough, and he's gonna muscle his way through, and the others are kind of nervous and worried. But when James Spader gets there, he's filled with this sense of wonder and excitement, and his life's work is built to this moment. So he walked to the Stargate and he put his hands in, and then he pulled his hands out and he looked at his hands and he looked up with this wonder, and then he went into it. And it was a magical moment. But Jeff Oken, who was our effects supervisor, was literally screaming, standing right next to me going, "I can't hold the effect that long. Tell him I can't hold the effect that long." And I'm like, shut up, because let him do his thing. We'll figure it out later. And of course, Jeff Oken is a brilliant effects supervisor, and he did figure it out later. And it became a magical moment that ended up being much more about the character than the effect.
Yeah, and it's such a great gear shifting kind of moment too, because it's a terrifying thing that they're walking towards for the first half of that sequence, and it's very tense, and even the score it's like that nails on a chalkboard kind of base of your skull sort of score. And then he pauses, and here's this guy just kind of appreciating the beauty of what's in front of him. And this, again, the score also turns into this sweeping kind of the theme, the da, 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 da. Yeah, it's this really beautiful moment before he's transported across a galaxy.
And that's why you have to really give some freedom to the set. There's 3 parts of filmmaking. There's the writing part, there's the shooting part, and there's the editing part. And each one has to somewhat divorce itself from the other. If the shooting part becomes too religious to the script, you miss a moment like that.
Right.
If the editing is too religious to what you were trying to do when you shot it, you miss opportunities to create something new. So I think it was Tom Hanks who once said this, that the reason it's so hard to make a good movie is you have to make a good movie 3 times in a row. You have to write a good movie, you have to shoot a good movie, and then you have to edit one.
In terms of movies that hold up from that era and movies that don't, it's the ones that sort of accentuated the practical stuff with the visual. So I guess the question is the liquid part of the Stargate, and was there any version of that was sort of pared back a little bit to account for what was available to you at the time visual effects wise, or was it all just no, we got to get it looking like that?
No, we always had this idea that it would be the liquid. I think the thing of it exploding outward and sucking back in came in a little bit closer to the shoot. Yeah. But every time Roland would come up with another idea of how this thing worked, our effects guy would just lose his mind. But Jeff Oken is a genius, and he always complains, but then he always pulls it off. He's brilliant.
Were there any influences that you were trying to stay away from?
I think that I don't think you can do science fiction honestly in a vacuum, because there's been so much great science fiction work done. You're standing on the shoulders of giants, and to deny the connection is a fantasy, because there's nothing you can do where people won't feel like, oh, there's elements of this from there, or there's elements. So my feeling has always been embrace it. Embrace the history of this, because it gives you a common language. Like, for instance, the opening of the Ark, you see a room filled with sleeper pods. And if you've never seen science fiction in your life, you won't know what those are. But if you have, which I think most people will have who want to watch the show, they'll go, oh, those are like the sleeper pods in Alien, or oh, those are like the ones in Passenger, or there's a language. So I don't have to stop and educate the audience. So here's how cryogenics work, and I think it allows you to tell a story in a more fluid way when you just accept the fact that there are connections between what you're doing and what has been done before.
Is this one of those moments for you, sort of like I know they're bought in if this moment gets a pop?
That would have been Independence Day. The road on Stargate was very bumpy. So at the time, Roland and I didn't have an enormous amount of power, and our executive producer had a lot more power than we did. And when we did the very first test screening, it didn't go very well. And we rated, we had a very high rating in the slow area.
Okay.
And so afterwards, there was a big discussion. How do we fix this? How do we fix this? And my suggestion at the time was, I said, I think we've cut out too much of the character story. And so they're not invested in our characters. And our executive producer just screamed at me and said, you don't know anything about filmmaking. I make these action films. There's too much blah, blah, blah. We need more action. We need more action. So they sent us out. We shot 2 new action sequences. We cut out more character stuff. We put the new action sequences. We tested it again, and the slow rating doubled. And at this point, everybody thought we had a gigantic bomb on our hands. Now remember, this was an independent movie. We weren't at a studio at this point. And at that time, to do a $60 million independent movie was unheard of. And in fact, I think I have somewhere in my office the headline on Variety saying, biggest failure ever, ? And everybody left the picture. Literally, Roland and I went into the editing room the next day and there was no one there. Everyone was gone. Ugh. So Roland and I knew we only had a week before we had to go and record the score in England. So we worked 24 hours a day in the editing room, just taking out the stuff we didn't like that we were forced to put in, putting back all the character stuff we wanted. And then we did this new cut. But we had no idea if we'd made it better or made it worse. All we knew was our last test screening was a disaster. And then I had this weird, originally Jay Davidson was not an alien. In the film we shot, he worked for the aliens. But Jay Davison at the time was on so many drugs and so out of his mind. Literally, we had guys holding cue cards and this. And we're like, this is killing us. Our villain is not scary. And I said to Roland, I go, he doesn't work for the aliens. He is an alien. And Roland's like, how are we gonna do that? And I go, I don't know, his eyes will glow or something. We'll mess with his voice. Yeah. And we did. So we did all these changes, but had no idea if we'd improved the film or hurt the film. We went to England. David Arnold put on this spectacular score. It was so great. And then we flew to Canada and we mixed the film, again, having no idea. Now the film's finished. So it's getting ready to go out. And we get a call from MGM who decided to release the film. And they said, well, we want to test it one more time. And I was like, what's the point of testing it? We're finished. We can't change anything. There's no more money to change anything. They go, well, we want to test it for marketing purposes. So now we're doing this test screening. And literally, I'm in the bathroom, heaving, nervous. And then I stop, and I hear heaving next to me, and I realize Roland's in the next to me. And we couldn't even go inside to watch. We were so nervous. And then finally, I looked at my watch, and I said, I think it's over. And we walk in, and it wasn't over. It was the last scene. And it was like huge cheers in the audience. Oh, great. And the head of the studio was high-fiving us, and we're like, it worked. We did it. So we didn't know we had anything that even remotely worked until that screening. One
of the other things that strikes me about this movie is that it's early 90s, coming off of Schwarzenegger and Stallone and everybody like owning the 80s and Commandos and Terminators and all of those type of things. To then have an action movie and Kurt Russell was an action star.
Oh yeah.
But then to have an action movie that is sort of led by this academic was kind of a new deal at the time.
Well, I think that was kind of a theme in a lot of the movies Roland and I made together. In fact, I think he kept that theme going on. I guess we both kept that theme going on, which was the idea of trying to create our hero who wasn't a hero because of his muscles. He was a hero because of his brain.
It was very much part of Independence Day as well. And,
and The Librarian for me later, and I think he did the same thing with Day After Tomorrow, and so but I think both of us wanted to create another kind of hero, one that was much more nerdy like us.
Well, it worked because we're sitting here talking about it not too many years later. But Dean, thank you so much for being here, man. I really appreciate it. It was great to talk to you. Really appreciate the look back, but looking forward, catch The Arc every Wednesday at 10, 9 Central on SyFy, and it's streaming the very next day on Peacock. Thanks again, man. Great talk.
Thank you.